So, how will voters make their choice in the general election? Well, Center for Social Development in Africa, based at the University of Johannesburg, released a report today looking specifically at the factors that influence voter choice.
The outcomes are fairly similar to the previous 5 surveys of voters. Top predictors in 2024 are perceptions of governance, corruption, party loyalty, trust in the party leader and trust in the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa. Professor Leila Patel is one of the people who authored the report. She joins us now. Professor Patel, good evening and thank you for your time on Ballot Brief tonight. You found the biggest factors are the promises parties make about socio-economic well-being. So, for example, how important is the promise of jobs for voters at the moment?
Good evening. Stephen, in our survey, we asked voters, what influences or motivates them to choose a particular political party. And the top reason for choice of a party was if a voter thought that that party would create jobs, 55%. 3 other top reasons were about grant services, the person's desire for better life, because they believe that party would bring a better life, grant receipt, and if they trusted the party. So jobs certainly features very strongly as a socioeconomic factor.
Were these, issues ranked in any way, Prof?
Yes, they were. There were 14 options. So, and the top, we asked them to indicate their top 5 preferences. So that was just at the level of describing, what motivates them. But then we also did a further statistical analysis, a bit more complicated, but to find out what the connection is between their reasons for party choice and their actual choice. And that is how we then come up with a set of what we think are predictors or factors that would influence their choice in this election.
So, for example, social grants has always been, a big conversation ahead of elections. There's been a claim, I think quite a cynical claim, that people vote for the ANC to protect their social grants. I know there's academic research that shows that's not necessarily true. What did you find this time around?
In this survey and all our 4 other previous surveys, Stephen, we didn't find that this was a predictor of people's voting choice. There is a benefit to the ANC if you compare grant recipients and their choice for a party, for the ANC versus non-recipients. It's about 8%, and it ranged from 5 to 8%, 5% in 2017, and it sits now at 8%. So it's about 1% up from our 2020 survey. And that's interesting, though, because we've had a huge expansion in the grant system since 2020. So yes, grant receipt is not a factor, but previously we did find that fear of loss of a grant, if a person chose to vote for an opposition party, was definitely a predictor or determinant of people's voting choice, so they were more likely to vote for the ANC at that time. But in this survey, that is not a factor at all. And I suppose one is to ask the question why that is the case.
It's very interesting, for me, Prof, that, more grant recipients are now choosing opposition parties.
Yes, and that is a big change from our 2020 survey when about 36% of people indicated they would vote for an opposition party, grant beneficiaries. And this time around, it's well over 50%, 53%.
Could it be, Professor,
it's been a big change.
We get into difficult territory because we're asking people if they believe the promises political parties make. And we've seen quite a few opposition parties say that they will actually increase the social grant. I think the EFF has said that, Action SA has said that, the DA has said it will protect social grants. The ANC, of course, says it will keep social grants as they are. There's a national debate around a basic income grant. But could there be another sort of insight into this, maybe, that people now realise that a social grant is a right and can't easily be taken away from them? And that's quite an important insight if that is the case.
Well, we can only speculate about that, but it's certainly, if we look at what the reasons would be. The grant system has expanded a lot in a very short space of time. I mean, it is unusual. This doesn't happen easily around the world. So the numbers have expanded hugely since 2020, and with the expansion of the rollout of this SRD. So somewhere this is probably giving people a sense of comfort about their right to a social grant and that it can't be taken away. I think those fears have certainly abated. And the point you made about political parties making statements supporting the grant system, I think that helps. And therefore, it communicates a greater social recognition of the right to social assistance in reducing poverty. I think there's also been a bit of a shift in the away from the negative perspectives of views of social grants, that they cause dependency or, increase childbearing and so on. And the recognition that it also has a very important impact on poverty. And I think all these factors in the last 3 years seem to have had a bearing on the shift. We can only speculate about that.
Professor Leila Patel, thank you, from the Centre of Social Development in Africa at the University of Johannesburg. Really do appreciate the time.